All right, so we are diving into some serious college football drama today.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about commentator Kirk Herbstreit and the fallout from his tweet that kind of sent the internet into a frenzy. If you guys remember, the college football playoffs just wrapped up. And there was a ton of debate about which teams deserve to be in, especially after Michigan beat Alabama.
Yeah, it was a big upset.
It was a big upset. And it seems like Herbstreit's tweet, which was a response to an Oklahoma State fan account, really hit a nerve with fans, especially on Reddit. So we're going deep into a Reddit thread today entitled Herbstreit, Keep Believing the False Narratives Clown, to see what we can unpack.
Yeah, this thread is like a goldmine for understanding how fans perceive bias in sports media.
Exactly. And, you know, for those not super familiar with the online world, burner accounts are fake accounts people use to comment without revealing their true identity. And a community note is a crowdsourced fact check that Twitter adds to tweets. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of the Reddit thread, can you quickly remind us why Herbstreit's words carry so much weight in the college football world?
Sure. So Herbstreit is one of the most recognizable voices in college football. He's been a commentator on ESPN's College Game Day for years, so his opinions really have a huge influence on how fans view the game.
Right.
And when he says something, people listen.
For sure.
And that's why this tweet where he accuses people of believing false narratives caused such a stir.
Okay, so let's get into it. His tweet simply said, "Keep believing the false narratives clown." What do you think sparked such strong reactions?
Well, first, the timing. It was posted right after Michigan, a non-SEC team, knocked Alabama out of the playoffs. The SEC, or Southeastern Conference, is often considered the powerhouse of college football. And there's this ongoing debate about whether they get preferential treatment, you know, a.k.a. SEC bias, from commentators and the playoff selection committee. So many fans already had their antenna up for any hint of bias.
And calling someone a clown, that's not exactly subtle.
It's definitely confrontational, and that tone really set the stage for the Reddit thread. The word clown appears everywhere, almost like a badge of honor for those criticizing him.
Yeah, it's interesting how a single word can become such a rallying cry.
It speaks to the power of language and how it can be used to mobilize communities, especially online.
So let's break down some of the specific criticisms from the Reddit thread. What were some of the main points people were making?
The biggest one was, of course, the accusation of bias toward Alabama. Commenters were digging up past comments Herbstreit made about teams like SMU and Indiana not deserving playoff spots, despite having better records than Alabama at the time.
It's almost like they were building a case against him.
Right. They were using his own words to demonstrate a pattern of favoring Alabama, even when their performance didn't necessarily warrant it.
And then there's the whole burner account theory. Some users are convinced that he's secretly defending himself online through these anonymous accounts.
That's a common accusation whenever a public figure faces criticism online. It's hard to prove either way, but it reflects the level of distrust many fans have towards sports media, especially when they perceive a bias against their team.
They feel like the system is rigged against them.
Exactly. And when someone like Herbstreit, who holds a position of authority, appears to be reinforcing that bias, it really fuels those feelings of frustration and resentment.
There was also a lot of talk about his previous feud with Iowa State fans, right?
Yes. That was another example people brought up. To illustrate his tendency to get defensive and dismissive when challenged, it seems like this incident is feeding into a larger narrative about his personality and online behavior.
Yeah, the Reddit thread is basically a highlight reel of all his perceived missteps.
And that's important to note, because it shows that this isn't just an isolated incident. It's part of a bigger conversation about accountability and how commentators interact with fans, especially in the age of social media.
Okay, so we've talked about the backlash, but let's circle back to the tweet itself. What are those false narratives he mentions?
That's the million-dollar question. And it's the source of a lot of speculation in the Reddit thread. Some fans think he's implying Alabama should have been in the playoffs despite their losses, which would track with his past comments about the team.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be a popular theory in the thread.
Others believe he's pushing back against accusations of bias in general. He might be tired of being labeled an Alabama homer, as some fans call him.
That's interesting because that highlights the pressure commentators face. They're expected to be both knowledgeable and impartial, which can be a tough balancing act.
Especially when covering a sport as intensely followed as college football, where fans are incredibly passionate about their team.
And passionate fans can be very vocal online.
Absolutely. And the Reddit thread is a prime example of that. It's a space where fans can openly express their opinions, dissect every comment. and call out perceived biases.
Okay, but let's not forget, this wasn't just some random fan throwing shade. There's actually a community note on Herbstreit's tweet that further fuels the bias narrative. It links to articles and past tweets where he argued for Alabama's inclusion in the playoffs, even when they didn't meet the usual criteria.
Yeah, that community note adds a layer of legitimacy to the accusations. Even if it's just a collection of curated links, it's not just angry fans, there's evidence to back up their claims.
So not a good look for Herbstreit,
Yeah.
especially since CBS, a network traditionally seen as more pro-SEC, is now seemingly enjoying the SEC's struggles in the playoffs.
Right. It's ironic because you usually associate ESPN where Herbstreit works with that pro-SEC bias. Yet here we are with CBS seemingly taking a more neutral stance.
It really makes you wonder about the power dynamics at play here. Are commentators truly free to express their opinions? Or are they influenced by network allegiances and broadcast deals?
That's a complex question, and I don't think there's an easy answer. But this incident definitely sheds light on the behind-the-scenes factors that can shape the narratives we see on TV.
It's like we're getting a glimpse behind the curtain, and what we're seeing is pretty messy.
Speaking of messy, let's talk about the potential impact on Herbstreit's career. Is this a temporary setback, or could this tweet have lasting repercussions?
It's hard to imagine this just blowing over. He's a huge name in college football, but this whole incident has definitely tarnished his reputation.
The accusations of bias are particularly damaging because they erode trust. Viewers might start to question his every comment, wondering if he's secretly pushing an agenda.
So what are his options here? Can he recover from this?
There are a few paths he could take. He could address the criticisms head-on, acknowledge his mistakes, and commit to being more aware of his biases in the future. A sincere apology might go a long way with some fans.
Like a public acknowledgement of his imperfections can make him seem more relatable, more human.
Exactly, but there's also the risk that he doubles down, dismisses the criticism, or even lashes out at his detractors. That would only further alienate fans and cement the perception that he's out of touch.
It's a delicate situation, and his next move could be crucial for his future in college football.
And this goes beyond Herbstreit himself. This incident raises important questions about the role of sports commentators in today's media landscape.
Because it's not just about calling the game anymore, is it?
No, it's about navigating this complex world of fan expectations, social media scrutiny, and network politics.
And finding a way to do that while still being authentic, entertaining, and informative.
It's a tall order, but it's essential if commentators want to maintain their credibility and connect with audiences in a meaningful way.
So where do we go from here? Does this mean commentators need to shy away from expressing strong opinions? Should they just stick to the play-by-play and avoid anything that might be perceived as controversial?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think a lot of fans are wrestling with that right now.
Because part of what makes sports so engaging is the passion, the debate, the back-and-forth banter. Nobody wants to listen to robots reciting statistics. We crave those personalities, the hot takes, the bold predictions.
You're absolutely right, and I don't think this means the end of strong opinions in sports commentary, but it does highlight the need for a delicate balance. Commentators need to be mindful of their words and understand the potential impact they have on fans.
Especially in the age of social media, where every comment can be amplified and scrutinized.
Exactly, but I think it's also about recognizing that bias exists everywhere. Even in ourselves. As viewers, we bring our own preferences and loyalties to the table, and that shapes how we interpret what we hear.
So it's not just about commentators being unbiased. It's also about us as fans being aware of our own biases and how they might influence our reactions.
That's a really important point, and maybe it's about having more open and honest conversations about those biases. Instead of just accusing someone of being biased, let's ask, why do I feel this way? What evidence am I basing this on?
That's a great point. It's about having a more nuanced and respectful dialogue, both online and offline.
And it's also about recognizing that sports, like life, is full of gray areas. There's rarely a clear-cut right or wrong answer. Different perspectives can coexist, and we can learn from each other even when we disagree.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the biggest takeaway you hope our listener walks away with?
I think it's about acknowledging the complexity of the situation. This isn't just about Herbstreit. It's about the evolving relationship between sports media fans and the athletes themselves. It's about finding a way to have passionate, informed discussions without resorting to personal attacks or simplistic narratives.
It's about recognizing our own biases, being open to different perspectives, and maybe having a little more grace for each other.
Beautifully said. And at the end of the day, let's remember that we're all united by our love for the game. And that's something worth celebrating even amidst the controversies and debates.
Well said. And on that note, we'll catch you next time for another deep dive. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the conversation going.
So you know what's interesting about this whole thing?
What's that?
There are also tons of comments about Herbstreit posting pictures of his dogs.
Oh, yeah.
People were like, oh, look, he's hiding behind his dogs again.
Like it's his go-to defense mechanism.
Yeah, exactly. Whenever he gets criticized, he just posts a cute dog pic and hopes everyone forgets about it.
But is that really so bad? I mean, everyone loves dogs.
True. But it can come across as dismissive, like he's not taking the criticism seriously.
I guess that makes sense, especially when you have people in the thread posting these like really long, well-thought-out critiques.
Yeah, and even like rap battles.
Wait, really?
Yeah, there's this one comment where someone wrote this whole rap about how Herbstreit is a sellout.
Oh, wow. People are really invested in this.
They are, and it shows how deeply they care about the sport and the people who cover it.
So ultimately, where do we go from here? Is it even possible for sports commentators to express opinions without alienating some part of their audience?
I don't know. It's a tough one. I think the key is transparency. You know, being upfront about your biases and being willing to engage in respectful debate.
And maybe just remembering that at the end of the day, it's just a game.
Exactly.
Well, this has been quite a deep dive.
It has.
We uncovered a lot about fan perceptions bias in sports media and the power of social media to amplify those voices.
For sure.
So what do you think? Can sports commentators still express opinions without alienating fans? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And join us next time for another deep dive.